What's the most WTF thing a family member has done? My dad's second cousin went to prison for stealing. When he came back, he tried to get back with his girlfriend, but his son was already dating her. When my dad died, my aunt, his sister, contacted my family via email and said we no longer were going to exchange Christmas gifts. I don't miss your yearly $5 in a card anyway. Aunt Sally. My cousin was arrested with some weed, was bailed out and then broke back into the police station that night to try and steal his weed back. He's a family gem. Edit. Been receiving a lot of questions regarding his success in this mission. Let's just say, who knew police stations were a bitch to break into? When I was 17, my mother spent a good chunk of money to find a doctor that said I could wait to have heart surgery so she didn't have to pay for it. Even though we had 3 doctors saying I needed it, she found one that said no. So I had to wait 6 months until I turned 18 to have heart surgery. Also she could save $3,000 since my dad had to pay for 75% of the bill. He paid the whole bill and she paid nothing. That's probably the most WTF thing a family member has done. Remember that when she's old and can't take care of herself. My uncle framed my mom for a high-speed accident he had on a highway in Spain. He was driving her car and hit a car and ran away. The car had 2 kids in the back but luckily no one was killed. And luckily my mom was in the US. And had an alibi. He's an idiot and he's in jail now. My aunt is an alcoholic who had her driver's license taken for DUI. She drove anyway. She got pulled and told them she was me and that she forgot her license. The car she was driving didn't have tags or insurance. I had no idea until my insurance skyrocketed. Maybe we're related? I had an uncle that was a pedophile. He never touched me, but he did molest my cousin. And she told me about it. I turned him into the cops. My brother up-headed my baby sister. He was 18, she was 5. When it came out my brother killed himself. Also, my mom is a sociopath. So everything she does is f***ed up. My uncle tried to exorcise me because he thought I was possessed. Or when my brother got his driver's license suspended. Gets pulled over. Police. Do you know why I pulled you over? Brother. Yes. Police. Oh. Okay. You are not wearing a seatbelt, I see. Brother. Yes, I am. Police. No. I will report and fine you for not wearing a seatbelt. Brother. But I am. I don't accept your fine. Police. Then I'll have to arrest you. Brother. Fine. If that's a good idea to you. Go ahead. Police. Do you have ID? Brother. No. Police. What's your name? Brother. Your brother is going places. Jail specifically. After my grandmother died, my aunt cleaned the entire house out for herself while my mother and my uncle were out dealing with funeral arrangements. When they got back, the silverware, furniture, pictures etc. were all gone. My other aunt also took the $10,000 my grandmother left to pay for funeral costs and kept it for herself, which stuck the bill on my mother and uncle. Reading shit like this makes me realize how lucky I am with most of my family. When my grandparents both passed within 2 weeks of each other, there was no will. It was a mess in terms of getting things sorted legally. But there were no fights or arguments over who got what. No one stole shit. It was all handled with a minimum of fuss and very little drama. My stepfather once kicked in my door at 4 a.m. and threw a live chicken on my head. All he said was put that up when you go to school. Never found out what he was doing with that chicken. I found my younger brother face down in the drained bathtub spreading his butt cheeks apart and sucking in air to make himself fart. Fart bending. My father beat my mother. And she stayed with him. My father also refused to talk to my brother on his 18th birthday. I stole a 20 from my dad's wallet to give to him. At 19. He threw my brother out because my brother defended himself when my dad was about to take a swing at him for giving a valid reason for something that wasn't in my dad's line of reasoning. I wish I was embellishing. My brother is not confrontational. My mother doesn't actually have friends, just people she gives things to hang out with her. It's not a single thing, but it's recurring. The last girls' night out she had, she took one of her co-workers to New York and bought her a bunch of Coach tea. They stopped contact soon after. The most WTF thing they do is act the way they do. I haven't spoken to my brother in 6 years whilst I recovered from his violent aggressive behavior by getting a restraining order. Last summer I get a court summons to repay $70. 000 or my house will be sold. Turns out in 2007 he tricked me into signing a deed of guarantee. He racked up the debt, then liquidated his company and gave them my address for repayment. If you haven't already, time to talk to an attorney. Depending on how he tricked you, you could have a case, or you could be screwed. But it's worth an hour or two consult to find out. Get copies of the relevant documentation beforehand. Another crappy thing. When my grandfather died, he left the house to me, my aunt, my uncle, and my grandmother equally. Everyone signed their part over to my grandmother, but I was too young to. Fast forward to my 18th birthday. My grandmother says she needs me to sign papers so we can get a mortgage to fix up the house. I go to the lawyer and sign the papers. When I get back to the house, the locks are changed and I am informed I just signed over my rights to the house to my grandma, and surprise, I am kicked out of the house. I was homeless for 6 months until some friends, who barely knew me, took me in. My family got a mortgage on the house, squandered the money, and ended up losing the house to foreclosure. I could have freaking house right now. Makes me livid. My aunt, who has borderline schizophrenia, started screaming this past Christmas at her brother about how she knew that he killed my grandma, who passed from dementia last year. She said that he plotted with her, my aunt's doctor, and that she had proof because there were cameras and microphones in the house. Then she reaches in her pocket and screams, "I have the proof right here." She pulled out a spoon. My dad went to a hearing where his brother was being tried for armed robbery. My father and his siblings' parents don't get along. He wanted to go to see whether or not his brother felt any guilt or anything for his actions. Well, his sister saw him sitting there. She gets up, yells at him and throws scalding hot coffee on him, then attempts to get the police officer to arrest him because he went apeshit. My family on that side is a bit fked up. My mum went all tribal and killed an iguana with her hands that was scaring my friends at my birthday party. I didn't live that one down for a while. Edit. One Christmas, my uncle once chugged a few gulps of peroxide out of a soda bottle labeled peroxide from my grandma's fridge. My grandpa was battling cancer at the time and needed that peroxide for something. I'm not sure what for. My uncle is an idiot who drinks whatever he can get his mouth on. He got really sick and went to the hospital, but he's okay. Have a cousin who used my parents' computer to check his email, but instead, he was trading child pornography he had made with someone else. All the computers in the house had to be part of the investigation. The computers are still pretty screwed up with all the software installed by the investigators team, and they had to go to federal court. He's in prison for a very long time and he's been disowned. I think I may have one to beat. A couple of years ago, a couple of distant family members, father and son, were arrested for murder. That's pretty messed up as it is, but the details of the murder make it f***ing unconscionable. The father had been helping out this elderly woman, cutting her grass, etc., and found out that she kept her life savings stashed in her house. In short time, his wife gets a new car, and his son, who was a police officer, is suddenly able to pay off his bills and get out of debt. Apparently, this went on for a couple of years until one night when the father, and possibly the son. There were conflicting testimonies. Decides to break in and clean her out. The old woman tries to stop him and the arsehole chokes and beats her to death. Both father and son got life. And the wife got 25 years as an accessory. The father died in jail a few months ago. I don't really believe in hell. But in this case, I hope there is one reserved for him. My cousin stole her mom's boyfriend, whom the mom had a child with. Then had 2 children of her own with this guy. Yeah, make sense of the connection between siblings. Stepmom, stepbrother, uncle, aunts, etc. What kind of coffee mug will she drink out of now? World's greatest stepmom, half sister, former stepdaughter wife, etc. I was about 9 and snuck into my parents' room for snuggles in the middle of the night. Hated sleeping in my own bed. When my dad thought I was asleep, he started rubbing himself all over me. I wasn't old enough to know what was happening, but I had a strange feeling it was wrong and awkward. So I pretended I was asleep and just tried to roll away from him. When the memory came back to me at an older age, when I was able to recall exactly what that asshole was doing, it was too late to bring it back up. I never went back for cuddles again. That's f***ed up. My stepbrother used to make me blow him as punishment when I was about 6. Thank God I never have to see him again. My brother stole $7,000 worth of my stuff for coke money while I was on vacation with my wife and brother-in-law. I was letting him and his daughter, my niece, live with me after he tried to kill himself. He didn't tell me about anything until we were on our way home. And he prefaced it by saying, "Please don't kick me out." My dad impregnated a woman when I was 9. He told me during Christmas when I was 20 while drunk out of his mind. Until then I had a perfect family, so for me it was pretty WTF. A woman, not my mother, and his wife. Mom asleep on couch. Brother comes home drunk. Thinks it's his sleeping wife. Brother attempts teabagging mom and tells her to shut up when she protests. There is a story in my family about my hillbilly cousins who lived in the bustling metropolis of rural western Kentucky. Their toilet pipes had become clogged somehow, and since they were so handy, they figured that the best way to fix the toilet would be to unclog it using a hand grenade. Shockingly, this tactic managed to ignite the house and burn it to the ground. Although I think the toilet did get unclogged in the process. TL. DR hillbillies try to unclog toilet with grenade. House burned down. One of my cousins kept rubbing my inner thigh while she talked to me. It was more out of character than screwed up though. Edit. My aunt is a total bitch. She's done plenty of crazy things. She's currently on her 5th marriage. But she was especially bad around the time my uncle, her brother, died. There was a week between when my uncle went missing and when he was presumed dead. And in that week the entire family was gathered together at his house. My aunt secretly contacted the news about my uncle's disappearance. So all of a sudden like 5 news vans showed up on our family's property and reporters started pestering my grieving family members. Then, after he was presumed dead, she forgot to include my mom in the obituary. My mom and her brother were super close. So naturally my mom was incredibly upset. I also have another uncle who had a manic episode while speaking at my grandfather's funeral. This uncle is crazy fundamentalist Christian and started preaching about how we were all going to hell unless we accepted Jesus. And eventually someone had to wrestle the microphone away from him because he just kept going and going and going. Not my family, but from longtime friends of my family. My parents knew a couple who quit their jobs and went on to open their own business. Said friends became very successful over the years. Had a few children around my age. And were just rolling in money. The parents were easily clearing a few million each year. Then, one day when I was in college, their bookkeeper died. Because they had grown so successful, they didn't just want to entrust anyone with keeping financial records. So they called upon their eldest daughter to do it. Well, the daughter starts borrowing money from the business to make improvements to her house. take vacations, buy clothes, shoes, purses, etc. But never actually got around to paying any of it back. When 2009 rolled around, suddenly, there was no money in the bank. The immediate excuse was none of our customers have been paying us. But that was, of course, a total lie. In the end, the whole business went under. All of that wealth was totally destroyed and all the family members put on unemployment. It's 5 years later now and still very sad. My mother awoke one night to my grandfather's, on my father's side, hands up her shirt. Needless to say, it was awkward at the breakfast table that morning. I got into a verbal tiff with a family member. After the exchange of words they feigned an apology and then offered some homemade granola bars. I have a peanut allergy, so naturally I ask if there's any peanuts nuts. I was assured there wasn't any and that they knew about my allergy. Was sent to the hospital not too long after that. Last year for my birthday my sister got me a DLDO. She gave it to me in front of my grandmother. I almost punched her. My family is generally pretty normal. But I do have one aunt that will sue over anything. She has been on long-term disability from a car accident that was so minor insurance did not even fix her car. And when the insurance company sued to get her off, she managed to break her foot at the doctor's. Then sued him. Fortunately, a couple of weeks later she was sitting in her car in the parking lot of a supermarket and someone bumped her car. So back to the lawyer and back on disability. 2 weeks ago, she was walking across the grass between a sidewalk and street and tripped on a sprinkler head. She ended up in the hospital and is already suing. When my grandpa died after an elective surgery, he was 88. She tried to sue the doctor and hospital, even though he was fine after surgery and died a few days later. All this. And she is a total Tea Party supporter and opposed to Obamacare, even though her and her kids have benefited from it the most. My mother stole my graduation money. All $1,000. 00 of it so she could buy booze for her boyfriend's birthday party. Half my mum's family is on an anti-electrosmogram page, campaigning to get mobile phone masts taken down, successfully. Get Wi-Fi removed from homes, also successfully, and universities, that one proves a bit more difficult. Then they go and make fun of religious people. Seriously? When I was in junior high I wanted to go to a dance with a boy. My dad asked me what I would do if the boy said, "I'll put my hands down your pants if you put your hands down mine." That was his gross way of starting the talk. Lol. Way to not make things awkward. Dad. I could probably leave a dozen stories here if I had the time. My so and I were going out of town once. Her sister promised to give us a ride to the airport. We talked about it for at least a month, even offering to pay for gas, etc. Well, the day comes, and we are 1 hour away from leaving when she decides she's not going to take us. Her reasoning? Because we didn't pick up dinner for her one night that week when the restaurant she wanted dinner from was closed. Cousin climbed the Ibetjaruna, 900 meters, barefoot under the sun while high on crack. His adventure lasted 2-3 days. Climbed. Survived it. There is a club up there so maybe people thought he was a homeless guy and fed him. Came back to home with skin burns. FK'd up feet and dehydrated. I think he has some mental disorder too, but I stay the FCK away from that part of my family so I don't really care. My dad lied to me about having pancreatic cancer. When I was a little kid, my stepmom gave away my Easter eggs to the woman who takes care of her cat. I'm still not over it. WHO does that to an 8-year-old. My 2 uncles borrowed $10,000 from my grandmother suffering from dementia and spent it all on bullshit. Then when she had to get put in a home, the one uncle took her house and gave it to his wife's mother without asking anyone. Worse yet, they just stopped feeding her cat after they got there. So we had to take in a 14-year-old cat. Needless to say, it wasn't a happy transition. But my grandmother was really happy someone was taking care of her Topsy. Although Topsy is much more social and friendly now than she ever was before. When my grandparents first separated, my grandfather went to live at their lake house until things were figured out. My uncle told his son, my cousin, that our grandpa had moved to a faraway town to be with another woman, and he mentioned a woman by name that my grandfather was friends with, and that they were living together and he was never coming back. My uncle straight up fabricated this for no other purpose than looking cool for his kids. The woman he mentioned, she had died a few months prior from cancer and he knew it and still used her in a lie to his kids. My cousin still has a hard time talking to my grandfather because he has never been told the truth about the whole situation. Most of us can't really talk to my uncle. That's just one WTF thing he's done. Most of his life has been a WTF moment. 1. My aunt has burned down 6 houses. All of them were legitimately accidents. 1. Lightning 2. Forest fire 3. Faulty electrical wiring 4. Painting supplies in the attic 5. Dog knocked a candle over 6. My father was hit by a drunk driver about 6 months before I was born. He was in and out of a coma for a while and now has a severe traumatic brain injury. He was on a business lunch at the time, so workman's comp pays for his lost wages and medical bills. He was making a lot of money at the time, so needless to say he is kind of loaded. He had a collection of classic cars that would have gone to my brother and myself when we got old enough, so my aunt decided to use his money to have a garage built to store them in on her property out of the goodness of her heart. Those cars sat in a field while her TTY truck got to be in the garage for years. We didn't find out until it was too late and the cars were irreparable. Now somehow she has gotten to his conservator and they won't let him give me a cent for college, so I have to leave because I can't no longer afford it after working 2 jobs and going to school.